Hey everyone, it's Joy here for Honeybee Stamps. I have a pretty fall card for you today, and I did some stenciling and then used some die cuts to cut out the stenciled images. First, I'm going to do the background. I'm going to be doing some stenciling on this background. I have a piece of white cardstock. I did tape that down to my surface, and I'm using the Art Deco Patterns Diamonds stencil. I'm coming in with some dried marigold, starting in the center and just kind of lightly working out to the outside edges of my cardstock. I don't want this super dark. That's partly why I went with the dried marigold, but I did want a little bit of an orange feel to this fall card. Now I'm going to come in with the Patchwork Pumpkin Stencil. Now there's also a Patchwork Pumpkin stamp and coordinating die. I'm actually going to be using the dies to go along with this stencil. So now I'm just inking up this largest part of the pumpkin, and I'm doing Speckled Egg and Salvaged Patina Distress Oxide inks. I'm going to blend those two together because I wanted a little bit of a greenish blue pumpkin. I know that you probably have seen those at a pumpkin patch or in a store, and I just think they're so pretty. And so that is what I am going for today. So now I'm going down to the next smaller section of the pumpkin, coming back in and going a little bit darker. So the first layer of the pumpkin, I went a little bit lighter because there's 3 layers total, and you need to kind of go darker so you can see that there's a difference between each layer. I still am using the same 2 colors and just blending those together. So I did this first blending on this smaller piece, but I really couldn't tell when I lifted it up. So I put it back in place and just went back over and made it a little bit darker. And then you could tell that there's 3, I'm going to say layers to this pumpkin. And it really came out super cute. So once I peel this away, you'll see now, you can see that there's that 3rd layer. So I'm going to now do the second stencil that comes in that Patchwork Pumpkin stencil set. There's 2 stencils, so obviously you have the pumpkin. Now you have the stems and you've got leaves and flowers. So I'm just going to be doing the stem and the leaves. So for the stem, I used frayed burlap, and I think I used a little bit of peeled paint or bundled sage. I really can't remember, but I think it was bundled sage. Now I'm coming in with those 2 greens, bundled sage first, and then a little bit of peeled paint just to give each one of these flowers just a little bit of interest so they're not so flat with just one color. So I'm going to just continue inking up these larger and smaller leaves, just doing the same color combination of the bundled sage and then the tiniest bit of peeled paint. I chose these colors because I really did want to keep my color scheme fairly light. That's why I'm not using a dark orange or a dark blue, because I really want everything to be soft and pretty. Now in my little box, my little splatter box, I have the pumpkin there, and I am using Distress Spray Stain in Picket Fence. And I'm just using a really tiny paintbrush because I didn't want big splatters, I wanted little splatters. Then I'm going to come in with the dried marigold and just kind of squish that down on my work surface, add a little bit of water, and then I'm going to speckle that all over my whole background. Or splatter that, not speckle that. It's going to look speckled. That was my point. So I'm just going to splatter that, and then I'm going to put that aside to dry. So now I'm using these dies. Again, this is the Patchwork Pumpkin die. There is a coordinating stamp set for these dies. But I'm going to use those to cut out the the leaves, the stem, and then the pumpkin. Now I just inked up a little bit onto some cardstock with the bundled sage, and in the die set they've got the cute little like curly Q stems. So I'm going to die cut a bunch of those to go with the leaves onto the pumpkin. So now I'm going to use this die to die cut out the pumpkin. Now you'll notice the leaves and the stem have the white area around the image, but the pumpkin is not going to, except for on one side because I didn't line it up well, but it's no big deal. I just took my brush that I did the ink blending and just lightly went over that little white edge, and then you have this perfect little pumpkin image. So now I'm going to start gluing my pumpkin together. I'm adding a little bit of glue at the base of the stem and then just adding my pumpkin to that. And then I'm going to come in and do the sentiment. Then I can lay everything out. Once I'm going to let that stem dry on the pumpkin, and then we can put the whole card together. So I have a piece of white cardstock in my MISTI. I am using the word pumpkin from the Bitty Buzzwords Fall. There's a stamp and coordinating die. I'm just going to use a Versamark ink, sprinkle on my gold embossing powder, and then heat that with my heat tool until it is melted and nice and shiny. Then I'm going to use the coordinating die, and I'm just using some low tack tape to tape that in place and run that through my die cut machine. Now we can get this card together. I added some foam tape behind my pumpkin for dimension. I also want to mention that I did trim down this back panel about 1/8 of an inch on all sides. I am using my Honeybee Stamps tweezers and their liquid glue to just adhere all of these little pieces around the pumpkin. As you can see, one side is going to be a little bit heavier with the leaves and the vines, which is kind of how I like it. It almost feels like a triangle to me. And that is very pleasing to the eye when you're doing design. So I'm just going to finish tucking in these leaves with the glue kind of in and around. Then I'm going to add some foam tape behind the sentiment pumpkin because I want that to have dimension. And I stamped the other sentiment that says "Hey There" with black ink onto white cardstock, and that is from the Bitty Buzzwords Fall stamp set. And then I'm going to come in and I'm using Autumn Afternoon Sequence and Steampunk Gold. From that little sequence set, I used the little seed beads. They're really kind of an amber color. They're really, really pretty. So I'm just gluing those in and around the pumpkin. Then I adhered that to a white A2 size card base and came in with my white gel pen. I'm just adding some little dot detail to all of the leaves and the stem of the pumpkin and a few little lines onto those little vines. And then this card is complete, and I just think this is so pretty. It's kind of not traditional fall colors, but I just think it's really, really beautiful. Thank you guys so very much for stopping by and watching. I hope that you feel inspired by this project, and I will see you soon. Bye.